Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you for choosing our breakout session. My name is Christopher Prasad, and I work with the Inter-American Development Bank as a transport specialist, and I will be the moderator for this section. Now, our session is entitled, well, it's under the guise of One Caribbean, and it's really to look at the strategy for approaching food insecurity. And our focus in this group is going to be to focus on sustainable freight and logistic trade. I think for most of the sessions that we've had before, it's been identified that trade costs in the region are high. The region is challenged by limited connectivity, and we've been dealing with maritime, but of course we also know air as well. And then there's insufficient port infrastructure, and all of these leads to high logistics cost. In this session, we'll explore two interrelated areas. One being the low-cost connectivity to global shipping networks, and secondly, high transaction costs for imports and exports. So our panel consists of, starting my immediate left, Andrew Jackson, who is the regional head of supply chain for the United Nations World Food Program. Next is Zara Zhang, who's the global head of business resilience consulting at Maersk. We then have James Hookham, who's the Secretary General and is also a director of the Global Shippers Forum, followed by, well, the order, we have Dr. Patrick Anton, who's Chief Executive Officer and Technical Director of CARICOM Private Sector Organization, which is a CPSO, and followed by Rodrigo Ruperez, who is a consultant for the UN Trade and Development, UNCTAD. So without further ado, I'll go into getting the panel of experts to give us their views on this topic, and I'll start with Andrew. So Andrew, to start us off, there's been a lot of talk around CARICOM 25 by 25 initiative. From your perspective, what concrete initiatives do you see, and what makes you most excited about the logistic front?
Thank you, Chris, and good morning to everyone. Yeah, it's a great question, and it's obviously a very complex arena in terms of knowing where we should be focusing on and where to start. And I was reflecting on the question, and I think many of you in the room who have been working on this particular challenge for longer than I have, maybe a couple of decades, will certainly maybe have a glass half full approach in terms of where we are and what should maybe happen. And I think there's a lot of sort of understanding as to why that glass might be half full. There's been a lot of tried and tested initiatives in the recent past and further back. But also there are some of you in the room who will be a glass half full, that this time it's different. This time things have changed, and perhaps following the COVID-19 pandemic, where collaboration across the Caribbean and indeed globally, the barriers of that sort of partnership to tackle other challenges were reduced, and sometimes the impossible was able to be possible. So I think there is an element that there is certainly wind in the sails, and there's a more open and conducive atmosphere for different stakeholders to try and come together and to tackle this. So I do think I'm very much in the glass half full camp, but there are a lot of areas that really need to be reinforced if we are really going to really see 25 by 25 to become a reality. There are a couple of areas, of course, that I think many of us are aware of that requires attention. Of course, on the physical infrastructure side, many of the ports in the Caribbean have not been upgraded since the 1950s. There's a lot of work that we can do to optimize our ports in the Caribbean region. There's also the element of temperature-sensitive logistics for perishable products. If we're going to get regional trade moving, we need to make sure that we can safely deliver food. And this is something that doesn't always get enough attention. The integrity and confidence across the region really needs to be underpinned by a robust food safety framework. The other element is increasing visibility and analytics, ensuring that we do have end-to-end planning, forecasting, market signals on consumptions, on demand, so that we can inform the producers and the farmers in terms of what that demand looks like, and to be a little bit more organized on that side. The human development side as well is something that can be overlooked, and I think that there is certainly some great developments taking place across the region, especially with the University of the West Indies, ensuring that supply chain talent coming through into the market can certainly respond to the needs of what we're trying to do here and now, but also working with the existing workforce on continuous professional development. Now, I think, Chris, if you were to ask me what am I most excited about and what are we looking for in terms of areas where we can really accelerate, and it is a complex space. How can we get this moving? And I think for me, the big bucket that we need to focus on is the route to markets, right? So I think we've got clearly two very clear challenges. The first one is greater connectivity. You've probably been hearing this since yesterday in many different panels. We do need to stimulate greater connectivity, greater frequency, more secure supply lines right across the region if we're going to stimulate regional markets. So in addition to that, we can't just put trucks and planes and boats in place. It needs to be integrated, because the other challenge under the route to markets that I see is this product placement issue in the Caribbean, right? We need to create a marketplace. We need to support direct-to-retailer, direct-to-consumer sales channels. And I think that initiatives that try to combine those two issues, greater connectivity, creating an e-marketplace, can really stand the best chance, because we're trying to create the demand as well as putting the assets in place. So there are a couple of initiatives out there. One of them that you might be aware of, which is quite exciting at the moment, is the concept of Connect Carib. Obviously, at this stage, we don't know if it will be a game changer, but in terms of what we're seeing, in terms of the vision, in terms of the ways of working, we're starting to see this sort of system-wide approach of engagement. So the concept with Connect Carib, very briefly, is that there will be 3 ferries that will have regular departures between Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and several other countries. And the ambition is that it will be a passenger service for obviously local population, but for tourists, but also for cargo, also for cars, also for manufactured goods and agri-goods as well. And I think really what is exciting about this is that it's not just putting assets in place at the port and saying we're ready to do business, is that it is working with government at the leadership level, at the Prime Minister, President level. It's working with the relevant chambers of commerce to get businesses organized, and linking up with e-commerce platforms to stimulate that demand, to communicate out to producers that this service is coming into play. So trying to work the demand side is going to be fundamental. So in short, I think that is really what we're keeping an eye on. There are other initiatives in Barbados as well, the development of a freight terminal. Local private sector have also been trying to address the less than container load challenge. But I think the more integrated and the more sort of systematic approach in bringing in different players is absolutely key.
Thank you for that, Andrew. I think we'll now move to Zero. Zero represents big shipping, so I think we can get a perspective from them in terms of how they see, given the challenges that we have with the remoteness, the high costs, with the ocean services for both imports and exports. To and from SIDS, Zero, what are the strategies that could improve these conditions to enhance resilience of food supply chains in these regions?
Yeah, thank you, Chris, first, and also thank you for the audience coming to our sessions. And also, like Andrew and Chris mentioned yesterday, and also including today, we heard a lot of talkings and discussions about isolation issue for the seas countries and the high cost in relation to the ocean services. That's for sure. This is definitely a prominent topic at the moment. This is also underscored the common concerns across these globally. I think this is well. Thank you for the opportunity to allow me to share some of my thoughts about how we can better address this issue, how we can possibly reducing the cost, especially, for example, to improve the food resilience of the supply chains. So I think that the multi-tier strategies probably can effectively address the issues. When I say the multi-tier strategies, actually it's included in the two parts. The first part is about the network design, what I refer to the highway model. So if you think about the current ocean transportation modules, actually this is involved the ocean, the major shipping lines, including Maersk, including MSC and other shipping lines, to actually employing the relatively large vessels for the international transportation to capitalize on the economic of scale. So that's what they should focus on. And meanwhile, we actually can also have the local and the regional players, operators, to focus on the flexibility and the through coverage. This is also catering to the needs of the intra-regions, intra-island transportation. So I'm really happy to hear, also learn from Andrews, and he mentioned about there's a new initiative, the Connect the Caribbean things. It actually is, we are seeing these original suppliers, these original network, and gradually has been set up. So that's a really good thing. But also essential to this highway modules or highway setup, actually is the distribution center, the consolidation center that's supporting these modules. Also for this distribution and the distribution center, the consolidation center, actually it should be strategically located near these major ocean ports. Why? There's several benefits if you when we have this kind of a setup. You can imagine, so for the ocean, especially for the international transportations, for these ocean containers and coming to the countries, then if you have the deconsolidation centers and actually next to the port, the major ocean port, you have the opportunity to unload your cargo in a timely manner. That will help you to reduce the potential detention demurrage fee. That's one benefit. And the second thing, so with this distribution center, you also have the possibilities, opportunity to reconsolidate the cargoes to the same destination, to the same island, the same countries. So that's also increasing the efficiency of the transportations. And the third thing, if you have these distribution centers and deconsolidation center, at the meantime, you can also imagine, especially for the food, you started to build up some inventory, some stock for the food. This is also will help the countries to stabilize the food price with this safety stock. So that's what I see, the key benefits of this warehousing. And also this is an important part of the entire network design. And on this second part is, and also I think it could be the low-hanging fruit for especially for the CIS countries, where you consider about import things, and not just for food, but also for other things as well from the other countries. It's the increasing the container loading factor. This is a kind of a low-hanging fruit. Just to give you some numbers about the current average container loading factor, it's just around 57%. What does that mean? Just to give you the real numbers about how these things could impact your food price. Before I come here, I just quickly checked the spot rate for Shanghai to Freeport in Bahamas. Actually, last week, the spot rate is around, average in the market is around $7,400 for 40 feet containers. What does that mean? 40 feet containers is actually 67 cubic meter, right? So you can imagine, and then you pay $7,400 for this 67 cubic meter cargo, right? However, if you only load your containers, let's say 70%, which means per cubic meter, you are actually paying around 158 US dollar. And if you can, increasing the loading factor for your to maximize the use of the containers, let's say 90%, this is achievable by more smarter design your loadings and also design your packaging. This is achievable. So let's say if we can increase these 20% of your loading factors, also means that per unit, per cubic meter, you actually reduce your cost, transportation cost, to around 123 US dollar. So means every cubic meter you're probably saving 35 US dollars, right? So what does that mean? If you transport, the whole containers are loading for the oats, you know that 1 cubic meters and that actually can load around 500 kilograms oats. If you load corns, and that's around 700 kilograms corns, right? So if you can save these 35 US dollars per cubic meter, which also means you get opportunity to reduce your oats price by 7 cents per kilograms. Reduce your corns by 5 cents per kilograms. So if you think about the entire years, how many kilograms, how many tons that you import from the other countries for these corns, oats, all these type of food, actually this is a large amount of money. But it's just a low-hanging fruit, right? It's just increasing the way of your loading the cargo. So that's also, I see, the great potential that it can help to really help these countries, especially these countries, and to reduce the cost of price, the transportation cost of price per unit. And also, I would say that actually, at Maersk, we are also highly aware of these challenges that also we committed to support in these implementations of this strategy. So also we welcome if any these countries who are interested about these solutions, and also could be we can work together to explore the potentials and how we can improve the especially like a container loading rate and also the networking design. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Zara. I think this is a good segue to Bruno bringing James, who represents the shippers. So let's hear from the shipping perspective. What are the fluctuations in the service patterns experienced by shippers that create disruptions and uncertainty in the food supply chain?
So thank you, Chris, and may I also extend the Global Shippers Forum gratitude and appreciation to UNCTAD and the government of Barbados for inviting us to attend and participate at this wonderful event. So, as Chris said, I am the Director and Chief Executive of the Global Shippers Forum. Let's just be clear, we don't own the vessels. My colleague on my right does. We own the cargo. I provide a global platform for cargo owners in all modes of transport, but especially in maritime modes, to understand and respond to some of the challenges that are being encountered in current supply chains. We connect over 20 national shippers associations around the world and provide a platform for them to interact with international agencies and regional bodies as necessary. So I would like in that context just to perhaps take a few moments to try to unpackage what we've been talking about for the past day and a half or so as being supply chain disruptions. And understandably and predictably, a lot of the discussion of this has been in the light of the tragic events of the global pandemic, and indeed in Barbados, the natural disasters that have occurred. Add to that, obviously, the fallout from the global financial crisis in 2008, and what I would certainly consider to be a natural disaster, climate change. We are dealing with some truly epic issues at a global scale. But if it's possible, and you'll allow me, I'd like to park those, even though we've spent a lot of time talking about them, because they are the truly life-changing events. I want to talk about more of the issues that businesses confront more on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, in the task of managing supply chains, and in particular managing essential supply chains, which clearly comprise the essential foods and indeed the pharmaceuticals that we were talking about in an earlier session in this room this morning that I can see many of you are at. So we distinguish between world-changing disasters, the sort of disruptions that shippers are encountering on that much more frequent day-to-day basis are the variability, the fluctuations that occur in sailing schedules and sailing patterns provided by the shipping industry. And in the meetings that I convene and the online conferences and webinars that we hold where I listen and invite shippers to tell me what's going on so that we can respond collectively and understand the issues, I hear at the moment about activities in which expected sailings, expected arrivals of vessels have been changed, sometimes at short notice. The port at which vessels were expected to call has been skipped, as they say, skipped port, because of changes to the schedule, or indeed the entire sailing has been cancelled, the blank sailing, and a revised schedule has been put in place. Now, I don't think we should complain too hard, because clearly carriers have a responsibility in their own business to optimise their arrangements. But I don't think we should lose sight of the real impact, real financial impact that has on exporters and importers that are expecting cargo at a particular time and are having to pick up the consequential costs because the expected delivery pattern has been altered. So these are some of the, if you like, consequences of the challenges that the carriers are encountering and responding to, and the way that they fall out on their customers, the shippers, in ways that they are expecting cargo either to arrive at a port or to depart, so that they can get paid for their exports. Underlying all of that, of course, there are further frictions, and we've been talking about this a lot in this room this morning, about what we just call the costs of trade. So the non-tariff barriers to the movement of food, and we've heard a lot about the requirements, the differing requirements for food safety standards and that prevail in different countries. And they are encountered by the shipper as the compliance costs. So they're not in the question of challenging or debating whether such a standard applies. The shipper's job is to ensure that the goods are consigned according to that specification and that the sanitary or phytosanitary certificate that is necessary to make that export or to accept that import has actually been obtained and can be evidenced should it be challenged by the authorities. So those routine compliance costs also get in the way of smooth, uninterrupted, low-cost supply chains. And there's the inevitability of simply meeting customs requirements as well, which, quite rightly, are addressing national security concerns. But again, that's a job for the shipper, whether the importer or the exporter, in order to keep the goods moving. The most profound impact, in my view, in my experience, of disruptions on a day-to-day basis, though, arise in surcharges. Let me tell you, if I wish to convene a really good, lively meeting of shippers in the Global Shippers Forum, I just put surcharges on the agenda and my day is made. So, at the risk of upsetting my newly found friend on my right, I just don't think I would be doing justice to my members if I were not to put this at least on the table. But let's understand what's going on here. Surcharges reflect the ability of carriers, not just shipping lines, this frequently arises in other modes of transport, the ability of carriers to recover their unexpected costs, through whichever route they might arise, from their customers, but in real time. So this is the ability to alter the price of the service, the total cost of the movement of the goods, because since agreeing the original price, either a spot rate or a contracted rate, your costs as a carrier have changed, and you're seeking to get those back in order to continue to make a profit, in order to make your money. And the most obvious example of that just recently has been the way that with the decision by the shipping lines, quite rightly, to avoid the Red Sea and transit to Europe and East Coast North America and the Caribbean via the Cape of Good Hope. Within 48 hours of that announcement, the shipping lines had posted surcharges that would be added to cargo in order to recover the undoubted additional costs of making that detour. And there's a lot more fuel. The ships are at sea for longer. There are charter party costs. There are additional crewing costs. So we're not denying that these costs exist. It's just the ability to alter the agreed price in order to recover them in real time does put a real cash flow hit on the customer, on the shipper, who has to pay those costs upon invoice, sometimes in order to release the goods. You know, they're not going to be released until the bill has been paid. Now, this does create a lot of tension, a lot of upset, and I would just ask you to think about it in terms of the very sort of human impact that it has, because I talked to a lot of shippers who, especially during the pandemic when this was prevalent, but again, at the present time as unexpected costs are arising, have their head in their hands because they're having to go to their superiors in their businesses and saying, do you know that rates that we agreed for the movement of the goods? Do you remember the profit margin that we thought we were going to make on the movement of those goods? It's going to be less because we are going to have to meet additional costs that the carrier is imposing. And those costs are imposed on the buyer of the transport before they have the opportunity to even begin discussions with their customers in order to recover some of that costs, because it's all happening in real time. And that creates a real hit on those that are buying and shipping goods, and I would offer does create real tension, frustration in managing cash flows in often quite small businesses, and certainly provokes quite a lot of frustration and, as I say, very lively meetings of the Global Shippers Forum. So, Chris, I mean, that's probably a rather depressing answer to your question, but I think it's good to get those issues on the table, and maybe later we'll come back and look at ways they can be addressed.
Yes, certainly, because at the end of the day, we're looking at costs as well. So we need to understand the different components of the cost and how it's broken down and where is it these arise. So now I want to bring a regional context, and we'll now ask Patrick to answer how has the CARICOM countries sought to address food insecurity within the framework of resilience, sustainability, and inclusiveness in the supply chain, and what lessons have we learned so far on this topic?
Colleagues, thanks a lot, and I think it's we've had good context for the discussions, and clearly the discussions in this group must be particularly interesting. It is, in fact, the topic of our time. I want to take you through a couple of slides because I think it's important for us to get a grounding of where we are, and I want to do that in 2 minutes and then use the discussion to head off some important other issues. This is where we did this for the meeting. I'm sorry if it didn't come out. We have a little bit of overlapping, but this is in the red. That is the growth of extra-regional imports. And we've taken this up to 2023. The numbers for 2020, 2022, 2023. 2023 is provisional. So you can see where that's headed, and you can see in the blue where we are in the value of extra-regional imports. So you can see that we're pretty much flatlined, and you can see that we have the imports from the rest of the world, that is trending up. So we are again trending away from each other in terms of value. Now, the point I'm making is not trivial, because I want to show you the next slide. This is what the quantity looks like. And sometimes we mark ourselves too hard by not understanding the difference between the value, which of course also picks up the escalation in prices, and what we're doing in terms of the efforts in the region. So you can see in terms of the efforts in the region, intra-regional imports. You can see that that is now trended down, having trended up since 2019, and you can see extra-regional imports that is trending up as well. That's the quantity. So the quantity story is similar but not stark. The growth is important though. Intra-regional agricultural growth is still positive, but we need to get those numbers up. The next slide shows you very quickly what the share is. So agricultural's importance to the export trade. The green one will show you that our intra-regional agriculture as a share of total intra-regional CSME trade is ended up. And that's I want to remind you about that because there are some bright spots. So as a share of total intra-trade, agriculture is actually starting to do better. And you can see what's happening in terms of extra-regional agriculture as a share of total extra-regional exports that's trending down. Great. Now, the only other slide I want to show you quickly is where this is taking place. And we think this is important. Part of the discussions that we've been having, understandably, is to generalize where we are. What the CPSO and our members that come from the private sector have directed us to do is to start focusing on where the pain points are, and the pain points come from what's happening in the countries, what's happening in the sectors. So if you look, you can see, for instance, up to 2022, 2023 is not much different, but we didn't put it here because the FAO and others are still finalizing a couple of the numbers. Not very different. This is a very good reflection. You can see St. Vincent, that we have agricultural growth in food production in St. Vincent up, and that accords with what we're seeing both intra-regionally and outside. You can see in Trinidad and Tobago down slightly, but if you look at the side, it's actually very small numbers. Taking it into this obviously messed it up. It's less than 1%, so it's not down by a lot, and that goes down to about 3% at the bottom. St. Kitts is worrying. That's down by about 10%. But again, it's only worrying if you don't understand it in the context of CARICOM. Guyana is up. You can see Guyana up about 3% and growing. Dominica is up. Barbados is down slightly. What this really tells us, if I were to just skip out of this, is this. We have markets in CARICOM where agricultural performance is growing. And we have deficit markets in CARICOM where the imports are growing and where there is an opportunity for us to start linking those markets. We're not scattershooting anymore. We're starting to focus. So if you ask me what we've learned, is that I think we've started using data more to identify where the opportunities are and not just where the countries are. We have one of our executive committee members with us, and they've asked us to look at what's in the container, what's in the shipment. So you will see tomorrow when we present, we have a list of items that are in the container. And we're no longer shooting in the dark. We're talking about taking pawpaw and pineapple from outside when we have countries in the region where they are literally being produced, being spoiled on the side of the roads, right? And also where you have substantial production that's being flooded. Yes? You're talking about opportunities such as vegetables. Let me tell you, lettuce. We've started now looking at where are the opportunities and what can we do. It is not true that this region cannot compete. Let me tell you this. When we speak to the hoteliers in this region, what have we learned? We've learned that we can compete, and we've learned that we need to use data more. When we speak to the hoteliers, the policymakers tell us we hear complaints from the consumers about quality. We push back and say that's strange because Butch Stewart tells us in all his surveys, people are complimenting the quality of the products that are produced in CARICOM, and many are asking where they can get them. But when they make an order on the manufacturing side, we can't fill it. Scale. And when we get great lettuce and great other things this month, next month it's not there. And when they get excellent steak in Grenada, at Sandals, and at the top-end hotels from St. Vincent, it's never enough. But there's steak in Guyana, and Belize is exporting cattle on hoof, and it's growing by leaps and bounds into Mexico. So where does this leave us? Scale. What must we do to increase scale? One, we have to be able to support the production systems with information, with technology, with investment, yes? And we also need to assist them when they have difficulties. One, R&D. What did we do in the CPSO recently? Because we listened to the private sector, not to governments. And we're really happy about some of the support we've had from governments. The private sector tell us they want to be able to access R&D because when they have a problem or a variety changes, right, they're 3 or 4 years behind. So we just signed an MOU with all the Caribbean universities dealing with agricultural research, extension, and technology. That's an MOU that we signed last week. And that will give us access to them. But then we plan to sign MOUs with the University of Wageningen and University of Florida and universities in Europe so that we have, for the first time, our people being able to leapfrog, right, on terms that they can afford, yes, access to technology. If you don't have access to technology, and I've measured this for years in various countries, you're not going to be able to compete, yes? And so where does that leave us? It leaves us with, when you get there with small, discrete producers in various countries, how do they get their product consolidated so that they can form the same, Zara, you spoke about the consolidation centers. They're absent in most of CARICOM countries. So we have cargo consolidators with us. They've been fighting for years to get our governments to work with us, right? So we can put consolidation centers together and the policy environment behind that. He just had a success in, is it Curacao? In Curacao. So what you're talking about in terms of being able to ship containers, we don't have that system which we need to put in place. It's not rocket science. It can be done. When we get to the ports are not always efficient. We have Darwin Telemac with us. We work with everybody. This is not just the CPSO speaking about academic things. We're talking about data supporting the practice that's taking place. You have ports such as the Port of Kingston. You heard Jeffrey Hall. Their performance is off the charts in terms of efficiency. But then we have ports such as other ports in the Eastern Caribbean. They're in the bottom 20% in the world. The question is, how do we get our ports that are in the top bottom 20% to actually perform as the Port of Kingston and the Port of Point Lisas? Well, one, we need to change the model. It can't always be government-owned, government-staffed, government-appointed boards, and government-driven. Yes? The second thing I think we need to do is that we also need to recognize that, look, we are only 16% of all the trade we do intra-regionally, i.e. intra-regional trade is 16% of total trade. We're having a presentation tomorrow. You will see a lot more of this. But it means that we have to be able to work with the other 84%. And that takes us to this model of how we actually transship and how we get our internal CARICOM system to work with the external system. So you read the news, and Massey from our region, they just bought a facility in Florida that actually consolidates. There is a real way behind the shipping shed where they're doing all of the consolidation. I did say consolidation. And they're in a free zone. So they're taking stuff from all over the world in a free zone where they've reduced transportation costs, where they consolidate, and our Massey is supporting 23 countries. Now you just reverse that. Same entities, same experts, one of them actually is from Barbados, leading the project. And you just think about what that would do for us if we had 15 countries feeding into centers like that, in free zones, exporting to ourselves and exporting to the rest of the world. Guess what? Our policy does not allow it. CARICOM does not allow products entering free zones to re-enter the jurisdiction and retain community origin. Let me tell you, that goes even for cocoa beans producing chocolate, both of which are CARICOM origin products, coming back into CARICOM. Once it enters the free zone, to enter back into CARICOM, you have to pay the duty as though it's coming from the United States. So we have policy work to do in CARICOM, and that's not hard. So let me say finally that it would be remiss of me not to mention we are on the third border with the United States. 2 weeks ago, they invited me to a seminar in the U.S., Economic Security as National Security. And I, along with a couple other brave professionals from the U.S., made the point that the return by the United States to protectionism, to subsidies, to supporting industries is going to be damaging to our hemisphere and damaging to national security. So we have targeted a number of products. We've targeted pork. And when you look at what the pork producers want in the United States, and it's a year when they're renewing the U.S. Farm Bill, it's an election year, and they have their ask. A lot of what they're asking, when you convert it to subsidies, is a substantial part of the price that we, in fact, can earn for a pound of pork. And that's not taking the subsidies into feed that they benefit from, which are not WTO. They are, in fact, not WTO prohibited. Subsidies through inputs are not prohibited. That's the rules. When you take this and you put your pork producer in Barbados, and you say be efficient, and he gives you a productivity lift of 5%, which is a lot, and you have a guy coming in and he gets a subsidy transfer of 10 or 12%, and then the government tells him, don't worry, because if you overproduce, I'll buy it from you and stockpile it. Then you know that we have some challenges that we need to now speak truth to power in pushing back on the protectionism that takes place in a lot of those countries. And I wanted to end by saying that we can compete, but we have to become a lot more purposeful about how we do it. We have to become a lot more joined up. Foreign affairs, prime ministers, policymakers, the technical level, in supporting the agriculture, the agri-food, and the trade corridors, because this region is teeming with opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. I think that's very informative, to the point. I'd like to pick up and put a question to Rodrigo based on what you're saying. Policy seems to be involved here, and I know that UNCTAD has a study or a project which was harnessing trade policies and trade and logistics to build sustainable, resilient supply chains in the Caribbean. So I believe coming out of that, there might have been some policy recommendations, how to incentivize producers as well as shipping companies and so on in the region. So if you can let us know how that went, what were recommendations, etc.
Thank you very much, Chris. Well, I think I better keep my mouth shut up after Mr. Patrick Antoine's intervention, because it has been a fantastic resume of things that should be done and can be done, and always thinking that we should not wait for any government to do our work. I think we different entities and stakeholders have a responsibility on growth, on development, and this is the social point of view that I think we have to be realistic and not waiting for someone else to do our work. So, very specifically, because we are running out of time for the second question, but I would like to talk precisely about the project we are going to begin within the region, specifically in Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago. This is an UNCTAD project. This is the cause comes from the high exposure during the pandemic. The problem with the mentioned food security, and also because the potential of these two countries to enhance the food security through sustainable and resilient agricultural production, trade, and logistics. It's not a question only of barriers for the shipping, but also for the commercial point of view. I think it is key, no? And we are going to, well, to work on different areas, also with the experience of different people. But in my case, I have been working on this in the Andean community, especially in Ecuador, Colombia, and Peru. And it has proved to be quite successful, especially for producers that want to export and that they have a product, but they don't know how to sell it, or they don't succeed, at least, no? Because when we think about barriers, we might think about tariffs or duties, okay? But there is also a barrier that is the certification, no? The certification is a certified product is something that at the end of the day, in the real world, if you want to sell in America, or especially in the European market, if you have an excellent coffee or an excellent cocoa, but you don't get in good shape to offer to the market, you are not facing the real demand. So you are completely out. It's not just a question of problems or of cost, of price, no? So for me, this point of the commercial, the trade issue is key to, and it has taken into account, as Mr. Antoine said, about the regional trade, but also for the export market, no? So here, the trade policy is very, very important in order to support the producers. We plan to do the BSS certification process that I will speak later, but sharing best practices in sustainable production and logistics, especially with coffee and cocoa. We have a very good experience from Colombia and Ecuador, and also supporting producers to give them training about the certification. And then when you have learned how to do it, then you can decide if it's interesting for you or not. But if you don't have that information, it's really difficult for small producers to open that window to the rest of the world, no? So that's our purpose. We will be working also on trade policies, but I think this is not the moment to speak about the investment in infrastructure or the public and private partnership. So, well, I hope this project would be very, very profitable for not only for Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago, but for all the region. And we precisely pretend to involve private producers and shipping and institutions. No? We have been working in the past with CROSC. CROSC is the certification agency within CARICOM, and they have been supporting us always. So, well, let's try that. This is our effort could help to connect, to have a more sustainable and resilient supply chain, food supply chain. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think we're running out of time. I'm just going to steal 5 minutes from your lunch break and ask the panel to be very brief on the next question, just really to summarize. So for you, Andrew, we can start with you again. Why is sustainable freight and logistics important to the UN World Food Programme?
Thank you. So I'd say for those of you who are not familiar with the World Food Programme's work, we feed and support people who are affected by disasters. So as James was saying, he was speaking to the day-to-day work, not the world-changing disasters and events. That's very much the World Food Programme's realm, as it is with PAHO and BHA and others who are in the room. So for WFP, the big picture is that we feed over 120 million people, more or less, every year across 100 countries who are food insecure. We deliver the food, we put it essentially on their plate. And obviously, logistics, supply chain, sustainable freight and logistics is absolutely vital to making that happen. It's the backbone of the World Food Programme. Without the private sector, we wouldn't be able to reach those people who are often in some of the most difficult to reach places. Right now, it's Gaza, it's Sudan, the list could go on. So it's vital to what we do. It's a key enabler, and we have a very keen interest in making sure that there is a vibrant, thriving private sector. And at times, we have to plug in the gaps. Just speaking to my colleague who's returned from the Gaza response before the seminar, we have to work together, whether it's establishing with our donors and partners a pier and putting in ships because the local market won't respond. That's what we'll do. During the Ukraine crisis, the Black Sea Grain Initiative, when shippers could not get insurance underwriters, that's when the UN and WFP will go to London and do what we can to reassure the shipping network and to put confidence to put their assets in play. And also, of course, during COVID here and in other emergencies, we see where there are gaps, we fill them in. Now, obviously, in the Caribbean, the work that we do is not at that extreme end of putting in assets. It's a different type of support to the sector. Some of you may be aware that yesterday the World Food Programme and CARICOM released a food security and livelihood survey, and it highlighted that 43% of people in the Caribbean are food insecure. So it's absolutely important for us to see that there is a thriving agricultural market, so that those people in the region who are food insecure have greater access to food. It's often cheaper. And as I said in my first question, one of the big challenges that we're trying to work on the logistics front is how do we increase that connectivity? How do we increase the role and bring down the landed cost of goods, particularly for interregional trade? If we can do that, then those who are food insecure in the region have greater resiliency to go out to the market and to meet their food needs. But obviously, we are on the forefront of climate change as well. So a lot of the work that the WFP Caribbean Multi-Office focuses on is on disaster preparedness, disaster response, and recovery. So, of course, we've learned a lot from working with the local and global private sector in logistics. We put about $5 billion each year into the sector, and we've learned a few things. And I think why it's important for us is the regional and local transport market stays and delivers. We've seen it in COVID, we've seen it in other emergencies. So we really want to encourage that local ownership, that regional ownership, because they keep the assets in play. They don't pull them out. We saw it in COVID, the international airlines, they stop. It's the local ones that stay. It's the local shippers. It's the local truck owners who will stay side by side with all of us as a humanitarian development community to respond. And that's something that is incredibly important. Cost effectiveness. You're going to cut me off? Okay, that's fine. All right.
I don't want to impose too much in the lunch period. So, Zira, I think just quickly, we haven't really touched on the AI digitization. Do you want to touch on that? I mean, I know in shipping there's a lot of use of these technologies now. How does it apply in our case?
Thank you, Chris. And also, I think Dr. Antonio already mentioned a bit and shared a light on this one, how digitalizations, how this technology can improve the transportation efficiency. So, conscious of time, I will make it very brief. I think there's actually 3 areas we can think of and to use digitalization and also AI to help us improve the efficiency. First is about the visibility. I think Dr. Antonio already mentioned there's a potential. So it's not just to improve the transportation's visibility, to see that what the cargoes coming, how shipping lines, and also James mentioned about the blank sailings, blank course into some ports. So if you already have the opportunities to see that something's coming, then you got the opportunity to make the better decisions and to find out what could be the alternative solutions, and also to have a better understanding about the potential implications. Then you can have chances to prepare yourself. how to mitigate the potential impact. So visibility is definitely something you can benefit from through this digitalization. And also connected to what I mentioned about this consolidation distribution center. The visibility, the data, the digitalizations actually can even help you to have a better management of your inventory. If you think about these food hubs and these things, so how you determine your safety stock for your food, what kind of food you need to stock there and how much. So actually for these warehousing things, if you really have a trusted platform for your warehousing, for these DC management, you even can further empower some your actual buyers that could be located in completely different locations, maybe some other island, can place the order online, can have a real-time oversight of their inventory. This is also to promote the intra-regions, intra-island trading. So this is actually, I see the great benefits for this visibility part. And the second thing is about also the predictions. So we, especially for these countries, it's super vulnerable to these nature disaster, right? So collaborations with these universities, with these organizations, if you have the better chances, better tools to predict the weather patterns, what could be the consequence of these, for example, the hurricanes, then actually you get also better opportunities to prepare yourself for the things that are going to hit you. So also I see that these predictions could be super useful to the CIS country. And the third thing is about the AI-driven, I would say, digital twin technologies. So for these digital twins, it's a kind of virtual stimulations of your physical asset and also physical process. So they create these virtual stimulations of the let's say kind of virtual life or virtual things. Then you get a chances to really use these modules to test that what the solutions, what the decision is the best ones for your current situations. I think one of the challenges for a lot of the leaders and also the regulators in a real crisis is you probably have several options, but you don't really know that what's the real consequence for these decisions. So it could be some consequence you see immediately, but also could be the consequence that it takes the time and that you will see it. So actually the digital twins give you the opportunity to have a better idea about how much consequences that you probably will need to take for your different decisions. I think that's also the opportunities for CIS countries to also consider about using this technology to help the decision making and also the disaster response. Thank you.
And James, for you quickly as well.
Okay, 2 words, skills development.
Okay, great.
Because these are all brilliant ideas, and whether you're investing in a deconsolidation centre, whether you are working on demand, these are supply chain logistics skills. They're transferable, they're teachable, they offer great careers, great job opportunities, very open to opportunities for women as well, in advancing to senior positions. But this is absolutely crucial if these great ideas are to be made to work on an ongoing, permanent basis. And this is, for me, over the past day and a half, I think a really important aspect that we don't overlook. Now, Patrick, I'm sure it's on the radar, but from my experience, this will make a difference towards turning this vision into, hopefully, an enduring reality. Skills development, capacity building. Thank you.
And Patrick, I think we've heard a little bit about private sector, but I think in CARICOM and in the Caribbean, the private sector is going to have to step up a lot more, I think. So, what is their role in this whole agenda, and how can they bring about change as well? Because I think a lot of the policy initiatives at the moment is going to affect them.
When you started saying that, the private sector has to step up, for a while I was looking for President Ali in the room. I didn't see him. No, I think the private sector, first of all, I think it's a moment in time. There is a sense in which we believe that the political directorate is open to hearing from the private sector and to making the changes. Albeit the case that we're still pushing on a door that's pretty resistant, because I've given you some of the things that we think need to be done. So let me say the following: economic incentives and confidence. If the private sector believes that there's an opportunity, because we've pointed to what needs to be done to enable it, and it's created, and there's a feeling that the confidence is there, both in terms of the policy and it's not changing, then I think you will see a lot more investment forthcoming. But we can take that up in another discussion. I want to hit 3 points. We've done a study of non-tariff barriers. And non-tariff barriers, if we were to eliminate them, based on our historic pattern of non-tariff barriers in agri-food trade in CARICOM, could lead to a 15% increase in intra-regional trade. This is an increase on what's there over a 5-year period. We've looked at the length of time it takes for us to solve some of these disputes, and that's why, as a CPSO, we're now involved in using our good offices to solve 3 disputes. One is on coconut oil. We have another one that we're in the middle of trying to solve on poultry, and a third one that came to us last night, because this forum is in fact serving as a good melding pot for a lot of the issues being discussed that we will agree on, I'm sure, when the executive committee meets this evening. 15% in intra-regional trade increase in 5 years if we get rid of NCDs, the non-communicable NTBs. This takes me to the FOPL, NTBs. The second thing is that we're working with the private sector. We have Connect Carib in the room and Azalea. We've been working with both of them, and what we've done with information is to say, look, this is not the right place to start. Based on our data, this is the sort of routes that you need to start on, and we're working further, not as a commercial player with them, but in giving them the information and in helping to direct proper decision making. And I would just want to recognize both of them, because both of them are here in the room and we are working with them in that regard. The third thing, very quickly, we need to now recognize what you've just spoken about as being important to us in CARICOM, not just in doing the research from the UNCTAD perspective on things like the carbon-based taxes in Europe, but we now need to put a mechanism in place to help very early to cause our exporters to be certified and to get their businesses certified so that they can continue exporting. And the fourth thing, and I want to hit on this one again and again, we can't go easy on the fact that we're on the cusp of seeing a reversal of all the gains that we've made. If we allow this very dangerous philosophy of protectionism to creep back into hemispheric trade. That, to my mind, I've heard one person speak of it, our colleague from the World Bank, and I had the joy of speaking with him last night, and he too was very, very distressed, because I don't think we understand that once the United States starts and China responds and Europe responds and so on, we're going right back to where we came from in the early 80s, and we can't afford that. We certainly can't afford that in agriculture, and we have to keep pushing for markets to remain open, even while we give ourselves the time and the space to cause our industries to scale up so that we can do all the great things we need to do on the connectivity side. So let me just finish this way. No one is coming to save us. Foreign capital is not coming to save us. We have money in CARICOM earning 1% and 2%, and we have opportunities in CARICOM generating significant percentages more if we were to target, focus, and be intentional, because no one is coming to save us.
Thank you for that. And just to wrap us up, Rodrigo, I think you touched on it, which is really the certification part, because there's a value added to that. You get a lot more prime costs or prime prices with that. Could you touch on that and before we wrap up?
Well, one question to the audience. Does anyone know who a voluntary sustainability standard is? Well, with that name, no. But if I say Rainforest Alliance or Fair Trade, probably FSC, you know what that is. Well, when we are speaking about certification, that's what we mean. Why? Because this is not just that we want to produce a gourmet or a niche product. No, no. It is something that if we are not able to do it, we are out of the market, okay? So probably, in many cases, I'm sure that here in the region, there are many things that they have the potential, the products that they have the potential, but they have to be well prepared to do it. Coffee from Jamaica is a good example, okay? Bananas also is a good example, but I want just 5 bullets about the BSS, no? Why? This is not only linked to the product, it can be linked to the service, the whole process, or even the logistics, okay? Because this has to do with simplifying certification processes. Whenever we go to customs, if it is a certified product, we are also avoiding some administrative burdens, some fees, some additional inspections. So this is a way of reducing cost. This is also being certified usually. Of course, we have to study every case, but the experience says that you are going to get a better price. If you are getting a better price, that's going to be good for the original producer, that is going to have some profit, that it will allow him to invest that money maybe in a better packaging or refrigeration, cooling equipment, so that he can offer a better product, no? This is a point. So this is also a consequence would be the reduction of spoilage. So we are reducing the cost. And what is the most important thing at the end of the day, from a market point of view, that is building trust. The traceability, the transparency, it's not just a question of logistics, oh, I know where it is. Well, no, no, no. It is something that the market demands, not only the professionals, it's the whole market, the whole supply chain. And well, there is a fantastic example in the region with the fair trade and bananas. I've taken some notes. In St. Lucia, it has improved the livelihoods of farmers, providing a fair price so they can invest, they can live much better, and this is social impact, that this should be our priority, I think, no, at the end of the day. In Dominica, very specific also with fair trade, they have reduced the use of fertilizers, okay, so, on pesticides, so the impact on the environment has been also very good regarding the water and the quality, well, the quality of the water and the soil erosion. And in Jamaica also with bananas, regarding the labor conditions, the labor force, well, it has helped a lot because of the exigence, that this exigence has a real consequence on everyone. So I think we should be putting our hands to work on this huge potential on Barbados and on the region. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And now I will open the floor. Any questions from anyone for the panel? Please, go ahead.
Dr. Antoine. So in terms of the private sector, you spoke about consolidation and so on, but you find that it's pretty difficult to move goods within CARICOM, mainly because of the bureaucracies that exist. So you import goods into Barbados, and then you ship some to St. Vincent, you have to go through the same process, the same health certificate process has to be done in St. Vincent, the same clearances, the same immigration process. And also, you find yourself paying duties 2 or 3 times when you consolidate. So what are the plans to improve that?
Yeah, so we are engaged now with the colleagues at the member state level in reviewing the common external tariff and the rules of origin. We have put a number of proposals to the member states which come from the private sector. Where the goods come from outside CARICOM, the proposals that we've put won't necessarily address it in that way, except for we have put to heads that we need to have a mutual recognition, right, of the standards and the work done by the standards agencies, so that once it comes here and it goes through that inspection and certification, you won't have to go through that again in St. Vincent or Grenada. You may have to pay the duty if it's coming from outside, but most of the times, yes, it is not the duty that causes the delays. It is these other things that cause the delays. We want to get to a place where once you pay the duty once, yes, you don't have to pay it again. That's a true customs union, which we don't have yet. It's called free circulation. We want to get there because, again, if we're talking about dealing with food insecurity and creating wealth, I did say creating wealth as opposed to just addressing poverty. Creating wealth for small and micro producers, including farmers, we need to look at how we enable them to access the inputs that they require. Now, this is not old talk. Let me tell you why. There's a small producer in Grenada. Their volumes are too small for them to get attention from the exporter in Miami. So they buy through a larger producer in Trinidad. So the inputs come in. I did say inputs. They come into Trinidad, and they're not zero rated. They're 5%, right? But 5% on top of all the duties and charges you're paying when you finish about 12, right? And then you pay more freight on top of that, and it goes to Grenada CIF, yes? And then in Grenada, you pay another 5, and you pay more duties and charges. So by the time it gets to the warehouse, right? As an input, although it's on the lower list of items when you talk about the duties, they end up paying 30%. And then you have the delays, and you have the suspicion because it's come through Trinidad, not directly from the US. That brings cost. It makes them less competitive, yes? And they're then trying to compete with products coming from free zones, from China or Panama, that does it once, and that benefits from tax incentives. Unless we make the politicians and our governments understand that, yes, we're not going to be making the progress we can as fast as we can. So I'm happy you raised the question. We want to work with you, and we want you to tell us more of these instances where you need our support. That's why the CPSO is there. So that's what we're doing. And one last thing, we're now doing something that will help you from banks. If you produce banks and you sent it into Trinidad, and they cleared it, and they were to put that with Mackeson, and they were to put that in a case to try to send it to Guyana, you have to pay the duty. You understand what I just said? Because once it enters, even if it's a whole, complete CARICOM product, you have to pay the duty because our rules do not allow us, right, to consolidate and ship out in that way. Now you think about something coming from Europe, some wine, and it's all going to the port of Rotterdam, some scotch, right, some vodka, and it lands on your doorstep, right? They are far more competitive, and their cost is far lower than yours. Not the cost of the first cost, the cost of the product, right? But the other costs are far lower than yours because you now have to pay duty on an alcohol product produced in CARICOM, consolidated, going into another CARICOM member states. We have to push back against that, yes? So I'm happy you raised the question. We have work to do, colleagues. We have work to do. This region is teeming with opportunities. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'd like to thank the panel. It has been very, very healthy discussion, very good interaction. I saw a lot of attention from the audience, synergies with what you're saying. And I think there's time to interact with the with the panelists during the sessions, during the breaks and so on. So I'd encourage you to. Thank you.